Please open your Bible to 1 Peter chapter 1. We have begun a series here in the Northwest region and entitled, and there it is, with a big reveal, Between the Rock and a Hard Place. And, little sheep, sometimes we feel like that in our life, where we feel like, I think I have my feet on solid ground, but I'm not sure. I feel like I'm between a rock and a hard place. But in reality, it really is that as a Christian, we're between the rock and a hard place, meaning Jesus is the foundation. Peter tells a group of Christians in the book of 1 Peter that very story, he being a great person to tell that story. A person who had a lot of victories, a lot of challenges in his life, eventually was crucified upside down, and is able to explain a very difficult problem for so many of us, which is, what is a Christian's response to suffering? Have you ever wondered that? That ever crossed your mind? I know that when I first became a Christian, I had in my head, man, this is going to be an incredible life. I'm going to conquer the world. I'm going to go all over the world preaching the word. I'm going to be used amazingly. And so many of those things came true. I thought, I'll have an awesome life. Praise God. God came through in a major way on that one. But, along the way, things happened that were confusing. And I didn't completely understand, well, God, why would this happen? Why would I be working along in the ministry and I had to leave the ministry? And then I struggled financially. And then my family was mad at me. And then my brother sort of wasn't too pleased with me as his life was going spectacularly awesome. And everything was going fantastic in his life. And I would wonder, where's God in the middle of all this? Why would this come upon me? Why would it be this hard? Is Christianity really supposed to be this tough? I remember becoming a Christian. I was working a union job. I'm going to get rid of this, shorten it. I remember that I was working a union job to get through college. I was working at Rainbow Bakery. That was my little spot in the world. And I'd got to know all these guys. We'd become good buddies. And I remember becoming a Christian and with fear and trepidation. Like, I have to go and reveal myself to all my union pals. And so the first time I went back to work, and I'd come back and forth from college, and I'd come home. And I remember coming back and not saying anything. Sort of like being the sort of secret agent for Jesus, just... And then I remember going back to school going, man, I kind of blew it there. I wasn't honest. I wasn't straightforward with people who were my true friends. These guys, we become great pals. I mean, we'd worked together for several years, and we were great friends. So I said, okay, I'm going back next time, and I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to be who I really am. And so I said, okay, how am I going to do this? So I wrote up all these little scripture cards, and I would memorize them at work. Because it was a very boring job working at Union Bakery, so I'd be memorizing these and doing my job and kind of memorizing them and doing a pretty good job anyway. And so my friend D said, hey, what are you doing? I said, hey, I'm memorizing scripture. Read this, D. And so I'd hand it to D and he'd read it. Wow, that's pretty incredible. And so throughout work, we'd be handing scripture cards back and forth. And then D and his wife got baptized. It was awesome. I was so fired up about it. I was feeling, wow, the victory and the joy of Christianity. But then the other fellows at work didn't have such a good reaction to me anymore. And they were critical of me. And I felt really rejected. And in the middle of that, one thing became clear. Christianity sometimes is a great joy. And other times, it can really be a path of suffering. And we don't always understand it, but if we're going to make it long-term as a Christian, and if you call yourself a Christian, you have to answer this question at some point in time. What is God's response and purpose in suffering? So we're sharing about that in the book of 1 Peter. And we'll read together Peter's response to that. The title of today's sermon is A Living Hope. And hope being such an important subject as we discuss it. Let's read together here in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 3. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In His great mercy, He has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. You know, Peter packs a lot of stuff into that set of verses. But he wants to communicate that we have an amazing salvation built on a living hope. Of course, you know, when you see things dying, you know, maybe your garden died this last few weeks. You went outside, you saw it all dried up and wilty. Sometimes we feel like that on the inside. We don't feel a lot of hope. We don't feel a lot of enthusiasm. We want to feel that as a Christian, but we don't feel it. But at other times, we are feeling a sense of living hope. It's growing. It's being renewed. He goes on to say this, "In all this you greatly rejoice. Though now, for a little while, you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come, so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes, even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. Though you have not seen Him, you love Him. And even though you do not see Him now, you believe in Him and are filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy. For you are receiving the end result of your faith, the salvation of your souls." You know, he says here, as you see there highlighted in the verse, that you've had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. You know, to experience grief is a great challenge. And grief is feeling bad. That's what it means. I feel terrible. I feel awful. I feel heavy-hearted. I feel weighed down. I feel sorrowful. I feel an ache inside of me. I feel distressed. I just feel bad. And that's what these Christians are experiencing. They are suffering grief in all kinds of trials. There's lots of different ones. But their experience is, I feel really bad. Can you relate to that? We all have trials. There are days we feel heavy-hearted, sometimes many days, weighed down, distressed, sorrowful, aching on the inside, and just generally bad. We feel spiritual trials. And that's where we're trying to be a Christian, and we're standing out in different ways. Maybe we're the ones who don't go along, with the crowd. We're the ones who really do have sort of a narrow set of viewpoints, who's considered to be a little weird, a little bigoted, who isn't included in the group. I'm constantly the one who isn't exactly included. I'm not invited to the happy hour. I'm not the one who's included in all the parties. I'm not the one that's most popular. I'll never be homecoming king or queen, because I'm just not that well liked. I'm different. I feel different. I don't like it. I want people to like me. I want to feel accepted. I want to feel like, this is a little easier than it is. We feel spiritual trials. Sometimes we feel physical trials. Some of us this morning as we've come, we have chronic pain. We hurt physically all the time. And it's frustrating. Chronic headaches. Chronic illness. We have several members of the group that are fighting chronic life-threatening illness. It's fatiguing. We don't have the energy to do the things that we want to. We've prayed about it many times. And God just has never seen fit to take it away. We have physical trials. Some of us this morning have financial trials. We're upside down on our mortgage. We've lost our job. It seems like we have bills that there's no end in sight. We're not getting ahead. It can be depressing. It leaves you feeling anxious. You're fearing for your future. You wonder, how on earth am I going to make it through this? How am I going to survive? And where in the world in all of this is the Lord? I've prayed so many times about it. Some of us this morning have relational trials. You feel lonely. You feel left out. You've tried to reach out to people. You've tried to build friendships. You've made efforts. You don't exactly know how to do it. You've done your best at it. You don't quite connect. You want to connect. You're trying to connect. And yet there's this sense of day after day, a loneliness I want a best friend. I want someone who considers me to be special. I want to find that person that thinks I'm the one in life to marry. I'm the one to be close to. You feel a relational trials. Some of us feel marital trials. We had hopes and dreams when we got married. Yet if we were really honest, we're not that happy in our marriage. It's hard to communicate. We're fighting. It's not the dream we thought it would be. We want an escape. So God, give me a way of escape. I know marriage is supposed to be for life. But I'm not that happy. This is hard. I can't do it. We wonder, is it ever going to be different? I've been to 100 marriage retreats. I've gotten all kinds of advice. Sometimes we see it in our children that they don't feel like listening to us anymore. They've drifted from God. They're involved in things that are painful to see. It's hard to manage it. Sometimes it's flat out hard to raise them. Sometimes we're not doing that well spiritually. In our hearts, we want to be fired up. We want to be excited to be here. But truth be told, we're not that excited. We're not that enthusiastic. We don't really like reading the Bible that much. We don't really feel that close to God. We want to feel close to God, but we don't feel that close to God. You know, each one of these things are trials of different kinds. All kinds of trials. All kinds of them. And in the middle of that, how do they feel? They feel grief. They feel bad. You know, that's okay. It's a good thing to feel bad if that's what you feel. In fact, Jesus did that. You know, in Isaiah chapter 53, it says, He, meaning Jesus, was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. That's the way they describe Jesus. A man of suffering, familiar with pain. God knew in this world that we needed a Savior. We needed somebody who had done it, who had walked it, who had felt it, and He would be able to lead us out of it. The Apostle Peter is responding to these issues. He's responding that we want to do right. Oftentimes we put a brave face on our Christianity, but it's sort of a charade. We know the right answers, but we don't feel them in our hearts. We want to rejoice deep down, but that's not what we're experiencing. It really isn't our experience in Christianity. We're not that happy. Instead, we feel grieved, heavy-hearted, weighed down. There are times of groaning where your face is in your hands. You feel anxiety. You feel stressed out. Sometimes it's hard to sleep. Your mind is racing. You can be consumed by it. We can have experiences of depression, a loss of hope and motivation. Each one of these things are true experiences Christians have had. You know, a few years ago, I've mentioned this before, but, you know, we had left the full-time ministry, and I went through about a year of depression. And I had all the classic signs of depression. Kind of a gloomy mood that goes on for longer than it should. A sense kind of, will life ever be better than this? Is life ever going to get better? Will life ever be more than this? Kind of a loss of interest in the normal things that I was interested in. And I remember my kids, they'll sometimes talk to me and they'll go, "Hey, Dad, you remember this?" And I'll say, "No, I don't remember that." And they'll go, "Oh, yeah, that was when you were in your dark time." And they'll do it just like that. You're in your dark time. Depression. God in His heart knows people feel those things. He knows they feel sorrow and weeping and struggle and despair. Sometimes people try to encourage us. Say, be positive. Get fired up. But it doesn't work. And you're like, you be fired up. And please stop telling me that. I don't want to hear that anymore. You are feeling grief in all kinds of trials. Some are like Job's friends who come to you and say, well, what's your sin? What are you doing wrong that would possibly cause you to feel those things? And you say, well, maybe I am sinning, but not that I know of. I'm doing the best that I can to do what's right. And in all of that, Peter comes along and gives us advice about what to do. And I hope that we'll hear that today. He wants to describe to us what it means to have living hope. He wants us to make a choice today. In fact, the end of the lesson is where Peter in verse 13 says, therefore, set your hope fully on the grace to be given to you at the return of Jesus Christ. The ability to somehow set your hope on Jesus. And He's going to call you to that. He's going to call you to make a response here to His message about how you could have overflowing joy even in the midst of grief and all kinds of trials. Now, that's not always where we go. I know as I reflect back on my own times of experiencing grief, there are a few different responses we can make. The first response is to grow angry with God. And maybe you've experienced that before. And in our hearts we say, well, but God, if you are good, why don't you help me? If you're really good, wouldn't you help me? And God, if you were nicer to people, wouldn't you have more friends? You ever thought that? Gosh, God, if you were nicer to folks, maybe you'd have more friends. I know that's sacrilegious. I know that's wrong. But that is what people think sometimes. Because in their hearts, they start to grow angry with God and they resent God. But I would encourage you, don't do that. Don't do that. Because God is God and you are not. And He knows a lot more than you. And He knows what your life needs. And He knows what He prepared you for and what He created you for. He knows why you're going through these things. So I would greatly urge you, don't get angry with God. Sometimes we feel sorry for ourselves and start to envy those around us. And if only. Man, I wish I had your job. Man, I wish that. I wish my folks had sent me to college like they did you. Man, I wish I had a husband like you or a wife like you. Of course, I wouldn't say husband, but I wish I had a spouse like you. Man, I remember when I was young and strong and healthy. Man, I envy you. Man, I wish I had, a good, strong body like you have. I only wish I could be as smart as you. But I wish I had the parents you had. Normal home, loving. I came from a crazy, dysfunctional background. Man, I wish my kids. I wish I'd understood how to raise kids like you did. I just wish. And you become envious. You feel sorry for yourself. You're selfish. Your world revolves around you and your thoughts. There's not room for others. God is not God. God's not able to lead you to minister to people because you internally have begun to feel sorry for yourself and envy others. And then finally, sometimes what we do is we decide to distract ourselves and numb ourselves to make ourselves feel something differently. And we're trying to find a substitute for the joy we're supposed to get from God and other things. Sometimes it's substances, drugs and alcohol. Some of us are addicted to prescription medication. We abuse it because we feel pain. Some of us drink too much. Sometimes we get lost in entertainment, watching movies, playing video games, goofing around, playing in sports leagues, trying to find a substitute for the joy God is meant to give us. Sometimes it's food. We love food. We eat our feelings, and then it's reflected by getting way out of shape. Sometimes it's sin. As we try to numb the pain with pornography, immorality, behaviors that we're trying to find an answer. We're trying to figure out how to substitute something in the place where God and the joy God gives is meant to be. But all that only makes it worse. And so today, for the balance of the time that we have, I want us to consider what Peter says in response to all of this. Let's reflect on the things that he says will provide the kind of joy in the midst of trials that we're meant to have. Here's what he says. In great mercy, He has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. He is giving you great hope. The place to begin if you really are trying to figure out how to be joyful in all of this, is to begin with the concept of hope. Because that often is the difference between really being able to rejoice in grief and not rejoice. Is having hope. That sense that the future is bright. The future is good. There's great things ahead of me. Do you have hope? That's where Peter starts. He says, you have a living hope. He says, it says you are a hopeful person, and it does make a difference. You know, this is an interesting painting. A guy named George Frederick painted it in 1886. And he entitled this Hope. And now another guy named G.K. Chesterton, who was pretty famous at the time, said you should have entitled that Despair. It's an interesting painting. But he was trying to describe true hope to people. And what he is, this is a woman, maybe it's his version of Lady Liberty, and she's sitting on the earth there. If you can see the whole painting, it's kind of covered with clouds. Because it's kind of a cloudy thing, her world. And she's dressed here in rags, and she can't see the future. And yet, as you see her lyre there, all of the strings are broken except one. She only has one string left. And yet, if you look at her physical, the way she's sitting, she's leaning into the lyre, and she's playing her lyre on one string. And she's continuing to sing. And he said, this is what true hope looks like. That sometimes when things don't go against us, or do go against us, and all is not as well as what we would like, and yet we continue, even on one string, to continue to sing and make music and praise God down in our hearts. He called it true hope. That's what the Christians in the first century would be like. Even when things hadn't gone all their way, they still had this internal sense of hope. And they were able to continue to sing and praise and worship God. It does make an incredible difference. Your future is shaped by how much hope you have inside of you. And I would ask you today, where is your hope? What do you feel like God is planning to do with your life in the future? You know, I read about this story, and I thought I'd pass it along to you. About two guys named Ken Henderson and Ed Cohen. And they were fishermen, and they were out in the Gulf of Mexico, and they were fishing, and suddenly this is reported in the newspaper a couple of months ago, their boat sprang a leak. And so they quickly started gathering their stuff, and their boat fairly quickly sank out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. And it was cold, it was the middle of the winter, and so they had their life vest. And so they sort of huddled together saying, gosh, you know, Ken said to Ed, they're good buddies, what are we going to do here? And as they were kind of talking about their families, how are we going to make it through this? We're out here in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. We're a long way from shore. How could we possibly make it through this? And so they began to talk. They talked about their families. They talked about all kinds of things. So as the hours would go along, they were hoping someone would come and rescue them. But after about 30 hours, they decided, I don't think we're going to make it here. And so Ken decides, I'm going to start swimming for help. Now, his friend Ed said, I don't think I can do that. He said, I'm going to start swimming for help. He said, but you're clear out here in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. He said, that's okay. I think I need to swim for help. So he swam for about 2 hours. Now, imagine you're out in the middle of the ocean and you're just swimming. You're just swimming. Now, why are you swimming? Like, what would be motivating you to swim in this ice cold water after you've been treading water for 30 hours? And so he swam for about 2 hours, and then he kind of got tired, and he rolled on his back, and he floated for a while, and then he swam some more. He swam that way for about 10 hours. Finally, in the distance, he saw this sort of like oil derrick. He said, I'll swim to that oil derrick. And he swam up to it, and he stood himself up on the oil derrick. Now, they had tried to use their cell phones when the ship was going down, but their phones wouldn't work. They were out of service. So he gets up on the oil derrick, and lo and behold, there's a phone on the oil derrick. It's a landline. He gets up there, boom, 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 calls his wife. Woo, here's where I'm at. Call the Coast Guard. And she calls the Coast Guard. As soon as the Coast Guard comes, he tells them, hey, you got to go look for my friend. You got to go look for Ed. He's still out there, floating out there somewhere. And so the Coast Guard, as fast as they can, they go and they look for Ed. But when they get to Ed, Ed has died in the period of time between when Ken decided to swim for it and when the Coast Guard got there. 2 men in the water, 2 men facing a future. One lives, the other dies. One has a future, one doesn't, I guess. And yet there was a solution within reach. I would submit to you, the difference between Ken and Ed was hope. A hope that would say, I'm just going to swim for it. I'm going for it. I know I'm out here in the middle of nowhere. I know this is a long shot. But I'm going to swim anyway. I'm swimming. Because somehow, somewhere, there's going to be an answer to this. Peter realizes that what people need, where they need to start in the middle of grief, in the middle of suffering, is they've got to renew the fact that they have living hope. That is what they need. You see, Jesus gives us living hope. Why is it a living hope? Number one, because it's built on Jesus. That's why it's living hope. He says here that it's living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. You know, Jesus was a man. He lived in this world. He went through everything you and I are going to go through. He had people criticize him. He had people reject him. He he suffered physically. Finally, people were so fed up with it, they crucified him. I'm sure they thought, we have put the light out. We have extinguished this person. We have got him out of our hair. And lo and behold, he's raised from the dead in heaven today, Lord of the world. They couldn't put that light out. They couldn't extinguish that life. He was raised and lives again. He's saying that is what your hope is built on. It's built on Jesus. It's built on the resurrection. He's saying to them, you know, things will come and things will go that give you hope. But if you build your hope on the resurrection, you will have living hope that always grows. Because you know, my hope is built on the fact that Jesus was raised from the dead. He's Lord of the world. If He could overcome death, the worst thing in the world, I can overcome it too. If He could go through the very worst and be raised from the dead, so can I. And so it's built on Jesus. But then number two, it's a guarantee of the future. Look what he says here. Into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you. What gives us hope is a sense of the future. He's saying you have a guarantee of the future. It is an inheritance kept in heaven for you. You know, for all of you guys who are worried about your retirement, if you knew your parents had millions and millions of dollars, they were just dying to give that money to you, you'd stop worrying about your inheritance. You'd stop worrying about your retirement because you knew you had an inheritance waiting for you. That's what he's saying. It can't perish, it can't spoil, it can't fade. You know, I have this super cool shirt that I like to wear. It's this white shirt. And lo and behold, somehow I spilled something on it. It came out of the wash last time with these purple spots all over it, totally ruined. You know, right into the trash. I like that shirt. At least I did before it had all those purple spots all over it. It's perished. It's spoiled. It's now faded. It's going to be in the landfill in a few days. It's not my favorite shirt anymore. He's saying that the experiences we have in this world are a little like that. They perish. They spoil. They fade. Our body gets old. People we love are taken from us. The stock market tanks. You know, a lot of things happen. But we have an inheritance that will never perish, spoil, or fade. It's kept in heaven. You have to decide to believe that. It's a guaranteed future. But then he says it's a protected future. He's saying here that by God's power, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed at the last time. What Peter's saying is God will protect you in this world. He'll watch out for you. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13 says, no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. It's the same word for trial as used here in 1 Peter. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but when you are tempted, He will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. God is promising, I will watch out for you. I'll protect you. You won't ever get in a situation more than what you can handle. You'll never go through a trial that'll destroy your faith. You'll never go through something so hard you can't make it. You'll never do that. I'll never let you go through like that. I'll watch out for you. I'll protect you by my power. And if you do a word study in that word power, it's the word dunamis. It's the word for miracles. It's the way Jesus was raised from the dead. It's the way the universe was created. So you imagine, you know, the power that raised Jesus from the dead, that's the same power that's watching out for me, that's protecting me. God says, you know, you have a living hope because it's built on Jesus. It's a guaranteed future. It's protected by God. And then He says, it produces a genuine faith. Read with me. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. What he's saying is, there is a purpose to all of this. There's a reason Christians go through trials. It's meant to refine their faith. He's saying that your faith has great worth. I have a purpose for you. I have a plan for you. I created you with a certain goal in mind. I have a certain number of things for you to achieve and accomplish for me in this world. And I'm going to get you there by refining your faith. There is a thread of purpose through all suffering. There is a greater good than the amount of suffering that comes from it. And that is the way God intends for us. Speaking of Jesus, it says, during the days of Jesus' life on earth, he offered up prayers and petitions with fervent cries and tears to the one who could save him from death. He was heard because of his reverent submission. He learned obedience from what he suffered, and once made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him. Jesus was perfected through suffering. That's the way it worked. Each one of us will be perfected through suffering. There are just some things you learn. There are some qualities you take on. There's a kind of faith you develop. There's a love for people that start and a humility that comes into you through it. Jesus had that same experience. Peter had that same experience. He was perfected through suffering. And that's the way we are. You know, if you would look down through history at great people who were used greatly in this world, almost invariably they were prepared by suffering. That's just the way that it works. You know, Abraham Lincoln, who maybe the greatest president we ever had, as he was sending millions of favored sons into battle, his own son Willie died of typhoid fever in the White House. He was so grieved by that he exhumed Willie's body twice so he could look at his face again. He went and dug him up 2 different times. He was brokenhearted about it. But he understood what it meant to lose your favored son. What leader in that period of time could be the right leader without understanding what it meant to lose your favorite son? Oddly enough, Jefferson Davis had the exact same experience, the leader of the South. As the whole country was losing their favored sons, Lincoln lost his too. See, he was perfected in his role by suffering. You might not like that. You might want to run from that. You might reject that. You might say, that ain't the way my life's going to work. I'm not ready to go through that kind of suffering. I'm not ready to undergo that kind of pressure, that kind of difficulty. But that is the way that we're meant to be perfected by God. It has a purpose. God is a God of order, not chaos. It's an ordered world. It's not chaos. It's not, a thunderbolt out of the sky that struck you. He is a God of order. Martin Luther King said this, when I was 14, I traveled from Atlanta to Dublin, Georgia with a dear teacher of mine, Mrs. Bradley, to participate in an oratorical contest. We were on a bus returning to Atlanta. Along the way, some white passengers boarded the bus, and the white driver ordered us to get up and give the whites our seats. We didn't move quickly enough to suit him, so he began cursing at us. I intended to stay right in that seat, but Mrs. Bradley urged me up, saying we had to obey the law. We stood up in the aisle for 90 miles to Atlanta. That night will never leave my memory. It was the angriest I've ever been in my life. What got him prepared to do what he did? Days like that. You see, God does have a hand in suffering. He intends to perfect your faith. He does it with fire. He expects to perfect your life with fire. The fire of affliction and suffering and trial and struggle. At the end of it, though, you are transformed. At the end of it, you're able to praise, glory, and honor God through it all. And at the end of it, you're the person God intended for you to be. You cannot shy from it. You can't pull back from it. You can't reject it. You can't avoid it. It's just the way that it is. Everybody has a certain level of trials. You can get bitter as a result of it. You can blame God. You can get angry. You can withdraw from people. You can medicate yourself with drugs. You can do all kinds of things in response to it. But you cannot avoid it. And it is meant to transform your faith so you have a genuine faith, a tested faith, a true faith, a faith that brings honor, glory, and praise to God, a faith that other people can see in you the goodness of God. One of the great things about the Christian church in the first century is people saw God in them. One of the ways they saw it is during times of great sickness. There was a great sickness in the city of Alexandria, Egypt. And people were so afraid they would throw their family members out on the street as soon as they got sick. They would literally take their family members, their mom, their dad, their brothers and sisters, and they'd throw them on the street. They're so afraid of dying. The Christians would come and pick those people up and take them back to their house and nurse them to health again. And they would die themselves. People saw the Lord in that. They said, "Sir, surely the Christians, they know the true God." Because they're willing to suffer, they're willing to love, they're willing to go through trials like this. I can see God in that. People will only see God in you to the degree that God can transform you, that He can remake you, that He can transform you into what He wants you to be. And you cannot get there if you're unwilling to be refined by fire. It's the way that it is. It was Peter's answer to this church. But he concludes this way. He says, why would you do it? Why would you want a living hope or a genuine faith to go through this? And he explains it. Look what it says here. Though you have not seen Him, you love Him. And even though you do not see Him now, you believe in Him and are filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy. For you are receiving the end result of your faith, the salvation of your souls. You receive a great salvation. Why do you do it? You love Him. You love Him. You haven't seen Him. You've never met Him. You'll only see Him, when you get to heaven. But you love Him. Who do you love? You love Jesus. You love the man. You love who He is and what He did and how He loves you. You love Him. And ultimately, you believe in Him. You believe He was raised from the dead. You believe He's the Savior of the world. You believe He has the answers. You believe in Him. And as you surrender and submit to Him, He gives you a joy beyond description. Peter says, I've suffered, I've failed, I've struggled, I've had problems. But I have in me a joy so deep, so glorious. I can't even tell you. I can't explain it. But I know the end result of it is it will bless me with the salvation of my soul. Awesome, great salvation. Someday you and I will have a chance to see that. What was His answer to the grief that they felt? A living hope built on Jesus, guaranteeing the future, protected by God, a genuine faith that's a transforming faith that would cause them to be used in this world, and a great salvation built on the love and belief that they have in Jesus. To close, here's his conclusion for you. Therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed at His coming. Put your weight down on the hope that will last. People will come and go. Your health will come and go. Your future, your fortunes will come and go. Money will come and go. This world will come and go. Our country will come and go. Whoever gets elected president next, he'll come and go. All these things will come and go. Your good fortune, your bad fortune, it will come and go. Your struggles, your victories, they will come and go. One thing will never come and go. The grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed. I would urge you, set your hope fully on the grace to be given to you. And then you will have full joy. And you will have the inexpressible, glorious joy that Jesus promises. Praise God.